Hey guys, welcome back to the Prehistoric Life Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Crawford, and today we have another guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Jonathan Wallard. I am a paleontologist working for the Oertijd Museum in the Netherlands.
So that's a long ways from where I'm at. And there's this Instagram if you want to go check him out. He posts a lot of amazing content. So please go check him out and support him. Um so the basic question I start off every interview with is, what's your favorite dinosaur?
That's a very good question. I do like the Scurio albersdorferi because that's a very nice specimen from Solnhoven. I just love the holotype. And also because the not only the preservation is awesome on that specimen, uh, it's also how do I say it? The preparation is very nice, and also yeah, I just love Solnhoven. So yeah,
That's a very unique and unheard of answer that's there. That's a new one. We love that. We love that. Bringing some unknown critters to the light. So, what got you into paleontology? What led you to want to pursue this?
well, it started I think when I was around 7 or 8 years old. I was always on holidays with my family, going to Switzerland, Germany, France, and it started with just collecting rocks and nice looking crystals and that kind of stuff, and slowly started towards a more interest into fossils. And eventually, well, it started at first as in we're going on holiday and you can find fossils here, and it changed into we're going on holiday here because you can find fossils. And yeah, that's how it actually started. And yeah, it of course, when I was around 15, it slowed down a little. Continued searching for fossils, but I had other interests as well. But that yeah, when I started my biology major, I just decided, okay, there is a chance that you can become a paleontologist. Let's go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's many people that are listening to this podcast right now that are going through the same feeling or something similar, and it's really just something to just pursue that happiness. I mean,
Yeah, it is. It is because, of course, the chances are slim. There is not much, at least in the Netherlands, there's not much possibilities to go and yeah, go on a career path that follows and ends up in paleontology. But yeah, it's if you do something that you like to do, then it's worth doing it. And I go to my job every day with a lot of happiness, and every day I enjoy my day. And that's the most important thing. And of course it's sad if you see people that try to get into paleo and they just are not lucky enough or something like that. Yeah, of course it happens, but I think if you don't try it, then you won't reach it at all. So just try it and see where you'll end up.
that's honestly just some solid advice for just anybody with anything. I mean, you won't know till you try. I mean, just go for it.
Yeah.
So, speaking of your job, what is it that you do? What exactly do you do?
Well, my job is very broad. Officially, I'm a curator here at the Oertijd Museum, and yeah, of course, my main goal is to just yeah go through our collections, make sure that they're okay, make sure that they're all organized, and also work on exhibitions and that kind of stuff. But most of my time during the week goes into our prep lab because we prep a lot of fossils here. Just working with the volunteers, teaching them how to prep, learning them new skills, but also supervising interns, for example, that are doing some research. I'm doing research myself as well. I'm working in my spare time on my PhD, which is also something that just, yeah, I try to fit it in somewhere. And yeah, besides that, I organize a lot of field trips and field work, mainly in Wyoming and in Solnhoven.
So you're going over here to
Yeah.
the country where I'm at.
Yes.
It's a bit farther than where I am, but yeah. So So field work and prep lab. So what kind of things have you worked on in the past? I mean,
Well, we just finished our second Diplodocus, and yeah, if you've ever worked on Diplodocus, then you know those guys are big and a lot of work
very
to
big.
finish them. And we just well, the prep work on the second one is now finished, almost everything, and we are now mounting it because that's something we do as well here. And that's what we are currently doing. We are working on a Plateosaurus from Frick, Switzerland,
Wow.
Triassic. We are working on some Ichthyosaurs from Dotternhausen, working on a Triceratops skull that we found last year in Wyoming, a crocodile skull that we found also 2 years ago in Wyoming, and a lot of different projects that just happened to come in between.
Yeah, that's a wow. So I mean, do you have any experiences from your first dig that might be out of the ordinary you'd like to share, or just share the story in general?
Yeah,
Oh,
the first dig I went on, and that was, I think it was 2018 or something. When I just started as I was still studying and trying to become a paleontologist, I got the opportunity to join, and I just did. And before that, I went to a lot of quarries in Europe and did go on a fossil hunting trips and such, but small scale and always in locations where okay, there are a lot of people have been here. And once you end up in Wyoming and you look around and you can see, okay, I'm literally the first person looking for fossils in this area. Nobody has been here before. That gives you opportunities that really surprised me, actually, that you can just walk around and just stumble upon a skeleton and it just happens to lay there. And that's something that sort of surprised me because at first you think, okay, it's gonna be, of course, it's hard to take it out of the
of course.
sediment, but it's yeah, finding one is not that hard actually. You can just walk around and stumble upon some bones, and of course, finding something good or something rare, that's of course out of the ordinary. But trying to locate just a bone or teeth or whatever, there are places that you can just sit on your knees and just start picking them up. And that
Yeah, I
surprised me.
mean, I think that is probably the one of the most surprising things is you don't have to dig like 100 feet, 100 meters down. It's like at the surface.
Yeah, and just because you can be the first to look there's just a chance to find something big just laying there.
It's all piled right there. I mean, and you mentioned mounting the second Diplodocus. What does that process look like?
Well, once we finish the prep work on the bones, of course they are reinforced, they are made sturdy with a lot of different types of glues and materials just to make them strong enough to be able to be supported. And then we start with the mounting process, and it just starts with bending metal in the shape that you want it to be. It's very simple. Of course, there are two major rules. It has to be strong enough because otherwise it will break apart, fall off, etc. And it also has to be as small as possible because it shouldn't cover the whole bone. That's ugly. So that's the discussion we always have. How small can we make it until it's not strong enough? So that's the difficult part, but it's just starting with the simple singular bones, just one bone, making a frame around it, making it in a way that you can also take it apart without having to completely take apart your skeleton. So you need to make it that you can take apart or take off one bone, so you can study it if you want to. But also, what's always very important is that it has to be for your for the visuals. It has to be attractive.
Yes,
Not too
very
much
much.
iron, not too much material. It has to be painted in a nice color. But also, of course, a discussion. Okay, if all the separate bones have their own small stand, okay, then what's the shape we're going to make the dinosaur in? How do we bend the tail? How do we put the neck? And how do we put the legs, for example? And that's after deciding on that, then we're going to start and saying, okay, we want to put the leg, the first one up front or something. Okay, let's put them like that. Okay, let's go and put them together and see how it looks. That's how it goes.
Then, of course, fitting it into the space as well, I would presume.
Yeah, that's always the most difficult part, because at first you start with, okay, it would be nice to mount it in this kind of stand. Okay, but the roof is not high enough. Okay, let's change it a little bit. Okay, now it fits, but now the tail will not bend enough. Okay, then we have to, and that's most often how it goes. You start with some sort of model. Okay, how we're gonna do this, and you end up with, yeah, a whole bunch of different kinds of yeah, shapes and stuff that has to be redone because it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, that's gotta be a hassle and a half because it's putting together a puzzle, but you have no idea what you're
Yeah, and that's
quite.
especially tricky with the diplodocus, for example, because those are 22 meters, 60 feet. Those are big,
Yeah,
and that makes it much difficult to make them fit in a room.
yeah, definitely. I could. Those are kind of ones that I would imagine. Like once they go up in an area, it's like, we're probably not going to touch this and take it down for a while.
Yeah, that's what you try to, but quite often at a certain point you'll say, okay, but it might look a little bit better if you turn it a little bit, or if you move this or that, or and eventually you will end up with putting it up and down a few times, especially during the whole mounting process, because you have to put everything on display, you put everything on the stand and on the mount, and if you have it standing there, okay, it's there, perfect, let's leave it there. No, wait, we're going to change the tail a little bit. Okay, let's take everything off again and let's put it back up again once we change the tail a little bit. And yeah, by doing so, we put it together and pull it apart like 50 times or something.
That's got to be. Has there ever been a moment where you're just like, guys, it's fine. We're fine.
So sometimes, yes, especially the bigger bones. For example, a femur can be 70, 80 kilos. That's
Oh
quite
yeah,
heavy. You
that's
need like two or three people to at least lift it safely, and preferably you need four or five to do it correctly. Uh, that's a lot of people to just lift it and put it somewhere else. Okay, please let just leave it now right there because I believe it's okay now.
'cause I would assume it would be simpler with smaller, a lot smaller specimen because you kind of like just put it together and then you can like angle it. It like takes
Yeah,
one person to carry it and you shove it in a corner or put it against the wall or whatever and it's fine. So
yeah, that's very nice, because quite often we get the question, what kind of dinosaur do you prefer to find? Because it's not only with the mounting process, but also with the digging, the amount of plaster you need,
oh,
the way
absolutely.
to pull it out of the field. It's the bigger it's more difficult to get it out. And I always answer, yeah, preferably a small one because it fits in my backpack, and it's not too much to carry, not too much logistics to get it out, instead of just those gigantic boulders we sometimes have.
That's got to be both are rewarding, but I guess it is
Yeah.
hard to find something small so you can take it apart piece by piece.
Yeah, last year we pulled out a hadrosaur skeleton, which was the preservation was amazing. Even the muscles were still in place, and we expect even to find fossilized skin. But the boulders it was in, the largest one was, I think, 700 kilos.
So, what is the what is your personal favorite part of what you do?
I think both mainly the field work I do love a lot. I think that would be my number one, but it does compete quite well with the prep work itself, because then you can see what did we find, and okay, in the field you can see, okay, this looks to be quite complete, but during prep work you can see that it is indeed quite complete. So that's what we are focusing on and what we are looking for as well. But for me, just being out in the field, out in the outdoors, in the middle of nowhere, just walking around looking for bones and digging up bones, that's the part I love the most. And I'm also, we this year we'll be there in July and in August, and I'm already looking forward to it.
That's got to be always exciting to look forward to because it's also like, all right, well, it's a vacation too, but I also get to do what I love, so it kind
Yeah,
of
both
goes both.
ways, especially since I work for a museum and the museum pays for me to be there. So it's
Oh
not
yeah,
just
that's
it's sort of a free vacation, and you can be there and do what you love. So
what has been the rarest or most exciting thing that you have personally found?
What I personally found was an Archaeopteryx.
Wow, that's Germany. Were
Yeah,
you in
yeah,
Germany or?
well, no. And I found it in 2019, a few years ago. Yeah, it sort of went like this. I go there each year just searching for fossils. I always bring volunteers from the museum, for example, with me to go there. And I also quite often go with my father. And this time I was there together with my father. And yeah, we arrived on Thursday, and Friday morning we started at the quarry. And yeah, it's slabs that you have to split. And at first you have to start with clearing out an area so you can reach blocks. And I started with clearing out an area, and the I think the third block I opened that trip contained the Archaeopteryx.
That's wow. Was it like articulated? Was it broken up? How was it?
It was fragmented, and that was a pity because we went back. The fossils from Solnhoven, especially the vertebrates, they glow under UV light. So we even went back in the dark to try to find some more bits and pieces. But it was preserved in a very, very soft layer and was hit by the excavator that they used to clean out the quarries. So we knew the moment I found it, I saw, okay, pieces are missing. We don't have everything, but we have quite a lot of the wing. There is at least one claw preserved, part of the shoulder girdle, and yeah, part of the other wing as well. Because once I found it, I started with turning over all the bits and pieces laying around it, and I found a few pieces from the other wing. So at least that was there. And a few months later, on the pile where the excavator dropped their load, they found a piece of the hind legs. So there was more. Maybe if there was a complete one, we don't know, especially due to the brittle nature of the rock it was embedded in. But there, at least there was more. We do know because you can see clear cuts, clear breaking areas from the pieces we had. But yeah, that's due to the excavator that hit it. And luckily, yeah, it was. Well, not completely destroyed. At least we found a few pieces, and yeah, we published it this January.
That's wow. That's got to be something. I mean, just finding even part of an Archaeopteryx is already finding an Archaeopteryx period is already difficult as is because of how, like you said, brittle the stone is, but also just how brittle the actual fossils are because of like how tiny it is, how small its bones are, and they're hollow, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken, from what we have found. And so that's our, I mean, that's like a rewarding panic right there because
yeah, yeah, and it's sort of because Archaeopteryx, especially if you go fossil hunting, if you're into paleontology, of course, everybody heard about Archaeopteryx. Everybody knows what it is, and it's sort of some icon of evolution, especially since the first specimen was discovered shortly after Darwin published his on the original species, of course, and it helped his theory a lot, with it being an intermediate form. And now yeah, it's sort of the holy grail. And especially in Solnhoven, you go there with a sort of, yeah, wish list. What do you want to find this trip? And maybe a bone from a reptile, maybe a nice fish, or some nice ammonites, which are quite often found there as well, of course.
hmm,
You go there with a wish list, and at a certain point you find the thing that's on top of everybody's wish list there. And that's just, yeah, and the moment you uncovered it, I remember it vividly, of course, because well, the moment you open up the piece and you see those bones, the first thing goes through your mind, okay, it's a marine sediment, and I find here bones. I can see a claw. I can clearly see a claw. um, that's not a fish. And that's actually what goes through your mind. Okay, if it's not a fish and you can see clear some bones, okay, maybe turtle, crocodile, pterosaur, okay, they're very, very thin bones. Okay, that might be something flying. The claw itself is very curved, which you don't see in pterosaurs. Okay, then it might be an Archaeopteryx. But then yeah, you know, okay, the chances of finding one, okay, this is number 14 ever found.
that's
Okay,
yeah.
in a few hundred years of searching for them because a lot of people went for them. So that's just, yeah, it's intriguing, and at the same time, okay, maybe it is an Archaeopteryx. Okay, let's go and see if we can indeed say to ourselves, yes, okay, let's start research to see if it's indeed an Archaeopteryx, and it was.
And on top of that, would you happen to know which species of Archaeopteryx or
No, we decided on calling it Archaeopteryx SP because both due to the number of skeletons of Archaeopteryx that were found, we do know there must be more than one species, especially when looking at the sediment or the depositional environment. It was an archipelago with a lot of islands. And if you look at different islands right now, look at the Galapagos, for example, as most famous example. Every island has their own small ecosystem, and especially with those small flying stuff, those tend to evolve quite quickly and change rather quickly. Okay, that means looking at the time in between the different specimens and also the amount of specimens that were found. Okay, there are some clear differences between those, but there's still a lot of ongoing discussion on, okay, are they different species or are they still the same species but just slightly different? And in this case, we had not enough material to even distinguish it from one or another species, so we decided just to call it SP because yeah, that's the safe way to go. And maybe in a few years, some more will be found. Maybe not. Maybe it will take a few hundred years. But every new specimen, we can learn a lot about it, and we can hopefully do or eventually distinguish those different types that we find and distinguish. Okay, these are indeed new species, or they're not. But at this moment, we decided, okay, let's put it in the middle and just say it's Archaeopteryx sp, and not change it into some another new species.
fair enough? Because that seems to be the responsible way of doing that, to where you're not gonna have people come in later and be like, all right, well now we have to take away a species or
Yeah, which is
whatever. And
quite often happening, of course, especially in paleo, because if you name a new species, you will become famous for it, and that species will carry your name, or at least the name you made up for it, and the mention that you made up that name. Yeah, that makes you famous, and quite a lot of people try to do so because that's, of course, for their career is best. But eventually, yeah, we see too much that a lot of dinosaurs are, especially with dinosaurs, they're put up on a large pile and says, okay, this is now one species and not 7 or 8 or 25, as was the case with Plateosaurus.
and just the lack of especially with Archaeopteryx, where it's such a low specimen size, and there probably are a lot of differences between the specimen,
Yeah,
whether it's quality, amount, or just like literal biological differences, that it's kind of hard to, because I think as of right now we have two that have been, like two species that have been
yeah, yeah, that's correct.
three, two or three. Yeah, no, two.
Two at the moment are accepted, but yeah, due to the crushed nature, because everything in the Plattenkalk is crushed, flattened, and that makes it rather difficult to reconstruct the original shape of the bones. And also those small bits and pieces, okay, uh, so quite often we do not know how they fit together. We do see some differences, and indeed, is this taphonomy or is this indeed a different species? Okay, let's compare the skulls. Okay, which one does have a skull? Because in most cases it's missing, and that
Yeah,
makes it harder to really distinguish those different species.
like yeah, just especially with something as delicate as Archaeopteryx, where the preservation bias is already against it.
Yeah, I think so, especially due to the thin nature of the bones. They are hollow, of course, makes it rather, yeah, rather easy to be crushed in a way that it's really hard to reconstruct it in a 3D shape.
And so I mean, that's Just finding one period and being able to get it out safely is already, I would presume, a hassle and a half.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's difficult, yeah, but luckily we managed to do so, and yeah, at least the part that wasn't hit by the excavator was really good condition and good enough to at least do a lot of research on it.
that's always a really good rewarding path. I mean, I can only imagine. That's struck bone gold there. That's
Yeah.
you get too big, you don't know where to put it. You get too tiny, it becomes a nightmare to excavate.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But luckily, in the case as it is in Solnhoven, quite often the layers are really hard, which makes it easier to excavate stuff. And if it's small, then it fits in one plate, and you can pull it out in one plate. Instead of like sometimes you find larger fish. The biggest one I found was I think a meter, and it's in six big plates. And still, those plates are big, but it's yeah difficult to take it out, and you're carrying up and down into the quarry with a new piece and another piece and another piece, and yeah, in the lab you'll glue them together and see how it fits. But
That's got to be annoyingly fun.
yeah, yeah, it is. I prefer to walk a few times with the amount of stuff you found instead of walking empty-handed and only need to walk once because you did not find much. But that's more often the case.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah. It's still rewarding either way. Um so what got you into dinosaurs? Like, or paleontology?
Well, as I said, I started with just collecting fossils, and eventually you need to decide, okay, which kind of animals do I like the most, or which type of fossils do I like the most, and also what is available. Because quite simple, if you start working at a museum, you can say, okay, I really want to start working on Permian reptiles, but yeah, if you don't have Permian reptiles in the museum, yeah, you can stop.
Yeah.
So I just started with both studying decapods because that's something I do quite a lot of research on because I like them as well a lot. But also, yeah, for the general audience, it's dinosaurs is more of the big thing. If I describe a new decapod, then nobody will come to the museum to have a look at it. And if you describe a new dinosaur, a lot of people will. So for the museum, it's better to just focus on dinosaurs, and that's what we are doing, just both on the research field as well as on the preparation and mounting and such. Yeah, it's just more people come when you have a dinosaur.
So I mean, you said that you worked on, is it Tekka or Deca?
Decapods, as
Deca.
in 10-legged.
All right. Would you like to share on those? Because those are actually rather
Yeah, it's for the larger audience. Those are most often less interesting. But the what I think is intriguing about decapods is the numbers that you find of it. Because very simple, we went on a field trip and we found around 1,000 with
wow.
I think approximately 30 new species, and that's yeah. If you go on a field trip hunting for dinosaurs and you find around 1,000, then that's insane. So that's the case with decapods. That there is much more to discover. They are much more diverse than other groups, of course, especially when compared to vertebrates. But also they have a larval stage. And what does that mean? The moment that you have an ecosystem, a coral reef, for example, where they're living in, and the conditions change, the water temperature rises or the water level drops, and the decapods disappear. They can disappear to quite a large distance because their larval stage they can just float in the water column and reach large distances, especially when comparing the animal itself is a centimeter across, but it spreads in a few months across a complete ocean. And that's making them quite interesting to just reconstruct all their or all the currents, but also a lot of yeah, they can tell us quite a lot on the diversity, the quality of the reef, and that kind of stuff, especially when looking at current, yeah, trouble in the world with the global warming and such, and changes in ecosystems, the extinction of species. Those We can learn much more from decapods on those kinds of topics than we can learn from, for example, the dinosaurs.
I mean, and when you find them, do you find them usually individually or just kind of like packed together in like a group or
Quite
very close together?
often, you find, because if the conditions are favorable for those animals to live, you find them quite packed. We have been digging on a block. The block itself was, I think, 3 by 1 by half a meter, and the whole block. Well, we didn't even manage to take off 30 centimeters, and we had a few hundred decapods, and the whole block will be filled with them. And that's a big difference compared to quite many other animals. But if you find them, you'll find a lot. But also, if a decapod is alive, it will leave its carapace and the shield, as it's called. It will leave 15 or 20 of them during its life because it's molting. So yeah, you can, from one animal you can find 20 fossils, and that's also something that's awesome.
I mean, this is probably a long shot. Have you found that those kind of 20 stages for a single individual?
You can never say, okay, this is from the same individual, because of course they change quite a lot. Currently we are doing a lot of research on that as well, because of course on the genetic stages of an animal, if it's a dinosaur, or if it's a decapod, or if it's something else, it doesn't matter. We do know that they change a lot when they grow up. And it helps us to get a better understanding. And hey, we can, with bones, you can make a core, a drill, and do some research on the growth cycles and see, okay, this is a juvenile or this is an adult. But with decapods, that's not possible. And the only thing to distinguish an adult from an juvenile is just finding a lot of them and comparing them with each other and see, okay, are these possible the same? Because especially when identifying them, you look at the number of spines they have, for example, the shape of the grooves growing along the carapace. You will try to distinguish, okay, how many yeah, of those are there, and if you do know that they if they grow up, the shape of those can change, for example, or the number of spines. And that helps us a lot as well in distinguishing, okay, do we have a new species or not? Because it can be the adult form of something we already know.
And then are they similar to like say crocodiles where they just continue growing or do they have like a cutoff point?
They well, actually, I think it's quite comparable with crocodiles, with other reptiles as well, that they continue to grow, but when they get older, they slow down their growth. But especially in their growth phase, they will quite quickly change shape and such, their appearances as well. And eventually, yeah, I think they will slow down their growth, but they can quite continuously grow. But just, yeah, with small decapods, they don't get very old, so they just don't have much time to continue growing.
And because I would assume they'd be fairly low on the food chain, so they're probably picked off
Yeah.
fairly often. And
Yeah, quite a lot of animals do have a diet based on decapods because they are quite abundant, especially their larval stage, of course, and they just also their way of living. Yeah, quite often if you find a whale carcass on the seafloor, there's covered with decapods, and yeah, the whale carcass itself is food for larger predators, but the decapods on top of it as well, and that makes it easier also as a food source. But that's why they're also very different, both in ecology, because they can change the role, what are they eating, where are they living, but also their appearances, because more spines is harder to eat, and that's why you can see quite a lot of changes between species within a very short time frame.
so I mean, yeah, I guess that's with the like fruit flies in modern day with evolution. That's how you kind of look at it through the fossil record is that they're very resilient, so they survive for a very long time, like trilobites.
Yeah.
Um, so they also just change fairly often, like slightly.
Yeah, especially because the generational time is not very long. They can quite quickly come to a new generation, And since there's a lot of pressure from predators, being able to defend yourself with larger spines, there's a lot of selection on those kind of things, which makes it quite easy to be uh, yeah covered in spines, and it's very quickly rather helpful to be.
And I mean, that's I mean, just wow, because that's find them all piled like that must be honestly. I'm thinking back, it must be like it would have been horrifying to come across that whenever they were alive. But
Yeah, I think it is, especially when looking at the diversity, because currently, if you find, especially nowadays, you can find large amounts of decapods on a beach, for example, but it's quite often all the same species, and we find them like 30 species altogether trapped in one small area. Okay, that's interesting. And also, especially due to their larval stage, it can help us, especially what you're, for example, doing right now in the Miocene of Cyprus and the Mediterranean. During the Miocene, you see that the connection between both the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean and Pacific of the Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea as well. There has been connections between those, and those connections disappeared, appeared again, changed a little bit, and we try to reconstruct. Okay, how much animals could go through those areas, could go through those connections. How much is the current ecosystem in the Mediterranean influenced through those connections? And hopefully with studying decapods, especially because those are migratory, you can with their larval stage they can expand rather far, and also they leave a lot of fossils, so you can quite you can use them quite well to see, okay, is this a way for species to migrate or not, and what tells us about the whole ecosystem, especially on the larger animals that are present in those areas. That's what
so
makes it very useful.
yeah, I mean that's and then I guess them all being piled on top of each other also means you don't have to go far for them. So you find them all. So I mean, you said that it's like 30 different species piled up. Do you think that could be something like that kind of happening in modern day that we're looking over?
Yeah, I think it does happen, but not in a way that you visualize it right now. I think it's more comparable with if you look at the ocean floor. Sometimes you have these gullies going on on the surface, and just clams and shells and whatever piled up on top of each other in there. That doesn't mean that those are living together. They just flush together into that small area, and I think it's the same with those decapods. I think those are just flushed together in a small area, but looking at the local geology, it's rather difficult to distinguish it. Okay, where does it come from? Can we see the rest of the area because it's quite overgrown? Can we see if this is indeed a gully that's filled up or something? But I think that's the case in at least this locality.
Could that be some kind of like air like gather area feeding frenzy uh breeding just grounds or something? Or is
Yeah, I think if you go to the beach right now, you have also these banks completely filled with shells, and if you look closely, you will find always decapods or at least fragments of decapods in there, and I think it's rather comparable with those areas. So yes, there are still living animals in there. We sometimes I found I think of those 1,200 specimen that we collected, there was one that was still with their legs connected, so not the remains of a dead one, but one that got buried alive. But I think those, most of the material there was dead, and there were some animals scavenging in between, or maybe hiding in between, because that's of course always a good way to hide if there's a lot of shells which you can use to dive under and dig under and such. But I think that's the case here.
so I mean, all right. So it's kind of general grounds. Okay. Um clearly things pile up over time. Could it be how are the species like organized? Do you think it could be just like over time of just
No, if you, for example, compare it with the lens formation where we search for dinosaurs, then you can clearly see the river channels, and you can clearly see, okay, this must be a different event at least. But in this case, with the decapods, I think it can be a short period of time, and not several events following up on each other, because there's no clear distinction between the upper and lower part of the boulder, for example, which you would expect if there was an event with a storm that flows and creates a lot of deposition of the larger pieces, followed by an sort of calm period with smaller particles, followed by another storm, which deposits another layer with the rough material. And I think that this is not the case. I think it's because it's all twisted and yeah, all in one gigantic pile. I think it's just one event, or at least one continuously going period.
what like specific decapod do y'all find the most? Like did you find the most?
Well, we are currently still studying a lot of the material, because there's a large group called the xanthids. Those are small decapods, but they have enormous diversity. They look a lot alike, all of the different species, and it's sort of a group. Yeah, I think a wastebasket taxon is a good name for it, as in a lot of people have been describing species from that group and throwing them all in a gigantic pile. And at this moment, somebody should be starting on, okay, let's remove the pile and let's see what we do have in here, which is rather, how do I say it? It's a There are so many species in this group that it's for me, as in, as starting with a new locality. Okay, is this something new, which is the easiest thing to say, or is this something that we already know of? Okay, let's compare it with everything we have. We do have a lot, and they have different names, but they look a lot alike. So should we start with putting them all together under one name, or what are we going to do with that? So it's rather difficult to say, okay, this is one, or the most common species, but at least it's the most common group. I think around 700 of our 1,200 specimens belong to that group.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a solid fraction of them. Okay. Um so I mean, how does excavating them work? Cuz are they still like solid, or do you just have to go around it and then
The blocks they are in, it's a complete reef. So you find a lot of corals and etc. And the main thing is just chopping up those blocks. Most of the decapods, yeah, that's the difference with dinosaurs. They tend to be very big. The decapods, the smallest we find are like 3 millimeters, and the biggest one are like 3 centimeters. So that's yeah, this size.
that's
Um, and most of them are in this range. So that's, yeah, really really small. And what we quite often do is just, yeah, you open up a block and you just start breaking it into smaller chunks, because the coral reefs are very very hard. You will just need a lot of force to just break them apart, and you will end up with very small blocks. And I have an example here. uh, this one, for example. um, this is, let me see if the camera can see. I don't think the camera will see it rather
might
well,
be too tiny.
but it's this round thingy here. That's it. So you break it into, you
Wow.
have pieces like this, and you see a small fragment of a decapod laying on there. And what you just do is just,
Yeah,
uh,
let's see if that
you,
helps at all.
I think my camera is just a little bit too bad quality, but at least you can see that it's small. But you just start breaking blocks until they are around that size, and if you see a small decapod in it, you use a marker just to circle it, and in the lab you prep it out, and sometimes you'll find a complete one, and sometimes it's not, and that's how it goes. So quite different with compared when digging up dinosaurs, where you just in the field try to uncover as much as possible and use plaster and such. No, those we will wrap them in a piece of toilet paper or a small piece of foil or something, and you can take them with you, because the rock is so hard.
That's yeah. So I mean, I guess that's also helpful because since it's so hard, it just holds together so much better,
Yeah.
holding in whatever it is instead of just falling apart.
Yeah, and
Huh.
that's very helpful as well. But yeah, especially with during the prep, there are spines on them, and those spines are like 3 millimeters or such, and half a millimeter thick, and it's really difficult to keep those in place and yeah, to prep it out with those spines, especially because the rock is so hard. I even had it that the rock itself chipped off, and the piece that chipped off hit one of those spines and it broke off. So that's yeah, the other side of the story.
That's gotta be very aggravating.
Yeah. But luckily we have a lot of specimens, so actually always most of them will end up really good and end up being able to be studied and described and such.
That's good. That's always good to hear that it kind of evens out along somewhere where the first five might be gotta shove them to the side, but eventually you get used to how they're shaped and how they break and
Yeah,
things like that. So that's got to be a huge stressful thing to have to excavate something so tiny.
yeah. Sometimes it is, but eventually you get sort of used to it. For me, working on a dinosaur bone, it's rather boring actually in prep because it's large. Okay, I have a rib. It's almost straight. The thickness. It slowly changes towards the end, but with the smaller specimens, the smaller decapods and such. Um, yeah, it's the differences are much bigger within the small area, which yeah makes the prep work a lot much difficultier, but also more fun to do in this case.
So since they are so tiny, what kind of tools do you work with during that?
Um, Quite often, of course, a microscope just to be able to have a clear look at them, and different types of air scribes, but quite often the bigger ones because the rock is so hard that you have much more use in chipping off bigger pieces instead of just chiseling off very tiny crumbs, because the chances are with those tiny crumbs that there's much more chance that the spines will break off, for example.
All right. So I mean, so you're just like working out here, looking into it. So that's got to be yeah. Do they look like, how would I put this? Way different up close under the microscope, or
Yeah. If you look at them from a distance, they're all spherical or sort of rhombic shaped quite often. And once you put them under the microscope, you can quite clearly see different structures, different shapes. Sometimes the presence or absence of a rostrum at the tip of their nose, the shape of their eye sockets, and there are many differences. And sometimes I even had it that we had a group, Calatheoids. They all look a lot alike. We started picturing them, and just to have a clearer image, because with a picture it's easier to compare them instead of just grabbing one, putting it under the microscope. Okay, looking at the different one, another one, another one. Okay, compare a sort of a feature. Then it's easier to just okay, we take a picture with a microscope and put them all together, and let's see if we can see some differences. And sometimes something new pops out from those sessions, because you can okay, the thing itself is 2 millimeters, and now we have something bigger that's better. Okay, let's go for it. And by doing so, yeah, we quite often encounter a lot of different and new species.
so. I mean, that's good. I mean, and of course, finding a new species is always exciting. That's that's always
Yeah,
rewarding in its own right. But the final question I really have for you today is why paleontology? Why did you choose it? Why just overall?
yeah. Well, as I said, I started with a major in biology because I just like animals a lot. If they're dead or alive, I love going out in the forest and look for tiny critters or larger animals. And Yeah, the fossils, it sort of intrigued me a lot, especially because they're very old, but also because they sort of sparkle the imagination. And you have something, you are the first person that sees it sometimes. You are, if you try to reconstruct it, you can learn so much from those past ecosystems. And there's so insane amount of stuff that we don't know yet, that we have absolutely no clue about, just because it wasn't preserved, or certain groups are just rare during that time, or not even already there. And that intrigued me a lot. And due to that, I just wanted to study them, wanted to learn from them, and wanted to, okay, let's see what we can learn from those. And that's why I followed a career in paleontology. And also because a lot of people don't know about it. Quite often, if you tell them something about a certain animal, they have absolutely no clue. And that's also something which I think, okay, everybody should have know about the past, and should know about every animal that lived there, at least how far we do know it currently. And that's what's also something that intrigued me a lot.
So yeah, wow. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, thank you so much for your time. I mean, that's a lot, and of course, that's I hope to see more papers and have you on again. And decapods are that there's just finding them all like that must be so, because I guess you don't like just remove the top layer and it's just they're there. So you gotta break it up, and that's got to be very rewarding. So
Yeah,
again, thank you for your time. I hope to speak to you again. And
you're welcome.
just thank you for coming on to talk to people and help educate on what you do in more fields of paleontology. And I hope this helps somebody out there. Um, but signing off, I'm your host, Eric Crawford. This is,
Jonathan Wallard.
and I'll see you next time for more prehistoric life dinosaur content. Um, yeah, goodbye.
Yes, bye.